What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the open source cybersecurity course. This is a continuation of a video where I show you how you can use Active Directory to protect Windows users against cyber attacks. In this video, I'm going to actually be joining a Windows client, kind of like a Windows 10 device, to the domain we've already built. So I first want to talk to you a little bit about how this works. Now, normally in a business environment, the Windows systems are joined to a domain, otherwise known as being registered in Active Directory. What this allows IT admins to do, and cyber defenders, if you will, is to apply policies and apply changes on a massive scale in a relatively quick way. So I'm going to show you, we've already laid the framework for it. We've already built Active Directory. Now it's time to go ahead and join a system to Active Directory. Now every time I start one of these videos, I definitely want to show you some of these knowledge base articles on Microsoft's docs site. Anything you see that's a website I start with, I put a hyperlink in the description below, kind of like a table of contents, if you will. So if you want to go ahead and go back through there and see those references, as well as join the Discord community, those links are in the comments below. So check those out. Without further ado, let's continue. One of the things, and you'll come across this, we'll come across this as I set this lab environment up further, is security groups. And I'm going to show you what a security group is essentially a firewall that operates within AWS, within the virtual private connections, which are the resources or the resource group in AWS that is your networked environment. So I'll show you why that's relevant, because what we have to do here is I'm going to show you how we're going to set up our client. Because remember, our cloud lab is almost ready to go. It's got Active Directory, it's got a server in it. Now we have to make sure we have a client in it or some type of device to manage. Now, unfortunately, AWS does not have Windows 10 images, but Windows Server 2019 is just as good. It does pretty much everything Windows 10 can do. It's just designed to be a server, right? So what I'm going to do first, and I want you to follow along. Now, again, these videos are best enjoyed if you follow along as I do it. But otherwise, you can watch this on your couch, eating some chips or whatever your favorite snack is. So make sure you're paying attention to this part. It's really important. I want to make sure that my client that I create, or my instance, of course, is in the same network as my server. So this is important. Otherwise, we would have to do some extra AWS stuff, which isn't all bad. But in this case, I want to make sure they're on the same network and they can communicate with each other. So here we go. So I'm going to go into the LTN-DC instance. That's my server. And I want to look at some of the details. One being the subnet ID. Now, this is the subnetwork identifier that AWS gives to my subnet. So I need to make sure when I create this new instance that's going to represent a client computer that it has the same instance ID, or is the same subnet ID, which I prefer to do it that way so I can put them on the same network and just have it ready to go. So what I'm going to remember here off the top of my head is those last four digits, 3043, or at least 43. Then I'm going to go back here to my instances and create a new instance, which will be my client. So we'll go ahead and launch an instance. Give it some time to load up the instance. All the options. I'm going to go ahead and grab this Windows Server one. That'll be our client. Pick the smaller instance type. It has more RAM, same amount of CPUs. But I'll tell you, this micro is not the best to use. I know it's in the free tier, but in the long term, as you add more capability to your servers and more functionality, you're going to start running into interesting performance issues. And that's a result of you having 1 gigabyte of RAM. So keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to go next to my instance details. Now, here's where we're going to set up the networking information. So keep in mind, AWS works just like traditional IT in that much more of it's automated and streamlined because Amazon Web Services is managing all of it. Yes, we get a nice GUI, a nice interface to interact with, but everything is pretty much built by them on their back end and maintained by them. So this really is an amazing automation, an amazing feat in technology to look at this. But I just need you to know all the same components are there that would be in an on-premises or a traditional network environment like is still out there. But this, this is just kind of a modern approach to it. So for me, I'm trying to mimic an internal network on AWS or a on-premises or a legacy environment in AWS. So it's representing what you would see out there right now in a big corporation. So okay, there we go. 4.3, grab that, make sure it's on the same subnet. Good thing. Gonna go next to storage. I don't need much storage space. I'm gonna leave the defaults. Keep those SSD speeds. Not gonna worry about tags. Security groups, a very important part. This is something I'm also putting down in the link. You should read about it. Supplement your videos with reading. I always recommend reading. It's essential. So security groups, think about them as a virtual firewall in the cloud, protecting your instance and protecting your virtual private connections. So keep that in mind as we do this. All right, so I'm getting ready to launch this. I'm going to just have it stay here. We saw in another video that RDP is allowed from anywhere. Now, ideally, what you would want to do is if you are managing servers in the cloud, you want to restrict from where you're connecting. I personally would do that, because otherwise anyone who's anyone and knows what they're doing could attempt to connect via RDP, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to give anyone that option. So you may want to control access from certain subnets or have an approval list that where you have a process that people have to go through before they are approved to remotely manage. So this is a process I would recommend putting in place. Don't just allow anywhere. Now for a lab environment, I'm going to leave that up to you. However, just a disclaimer, it could get attacked because it's going to be out there on the public. All right, so review and launch, right? This typically takes a few minutes to get up and going. I'm going to use the same key I've had before to manage this. This is of course, my cloud environment. So I typically power it down when I'm not using it. All right, so the instance is launching. It's right now, it's creating the operating system, or it's grabbing an image of a pre-installed Windows operating system, and it's getting it up and going. It's also setting up remote desktop protocol, because by default, Windows does not allow connections from our remote desktop protocol. You actually have to go into an area in the operating system called remote access, or just search allow remote access and it'll pop up. Matter of fact, I'll show you. So I have my domain controller up already with my OU structure that we built last video, and my educator showing. And what we do is as I was talking about with remote desktop, what AWS essentially automates is when you type in remote desktop, you can see you can allow remote desktop connections. So if you pull this up and you look at, let's see, right down here, show settings here. Oh, actually, it's not the right way to go. Okay, so let me find the other route here. It'll allow remote access. See if that'll pop up for me. All right, so not quite yet. Maybe it's the user I'm logged in as currently. So let's see. I may not have the appropriate permissions. Interesting. So I'll have to troubleshoot that later. But just trust me, if you go to those settings and you open it up, you're going to see a control panel snap in that gives you the option to add a user to the remote connections list. And that's what AWS has done in the background. So I just wanted to show you that. Let's move on. When we look at the OUs here, you're going to notice that I've structured them departmentally based on a site. So Texas was our site. And then we had the engineering department, R&D, and I added off-camera IT, because that's where I added myself. So what you need to know is we're trying to join a client to the domain. in order to do that, we need to have a user that has domain admin privileges. And that is a big deal, because if you have domain admin rights, you can do anything across the entire domain, which is what they call an Active Directory environment, or a namespace within Active Directory is called a domain. So I'm going to show you, I have my own account created. I didn't add myself to the group I wanted to set up, which is IT. So, of course, IT is going to be a part of this. They're going to have their own OU, which is an organizational unit. And then they're going to have a group, right? So each department would have a security group. So I'm going to add that group and call it IT. But here's the thing. Not everybody in IT will be a domain admin. So you wouldn't, because groups, sounds funny, groups can be members of other groups. Does that make sense? So if IT, you could technically add the whole IT group into the domain admins group, which would allow anyone who's in the IT group to have domain admin rights as well. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because with these bigger organizations, they typically have contractors they hire on, and that's a great way to get into IT for your first job, is through a contractor. We'll talk about that in another video. Feel free to message me. I know some recruiters that could help you get a job. But they typically come in as contractors, and the big company will pay them to do like level 1, level 2 help desk work, and they will not have domain admin rights. They will have local administrator rights, but not domain admin rights. You got to earn that. That's a right to be bestowed upon thee. All right. So again, I'm going to show you how to add to a group. So I'm just going to add my user, which is B Theisen, to the group. Let's see if I might have a typo here. So let me go into properties, account, and we can, oh yes, my login name is LTN Bob. So go here. That's why I always go to check, because I might be forgetting something. So LTN Bob, check, underline, there we go. It found the object. Apply. So remember, an Active Directory is made up of different Active Directory objects. Some of them are user accounts, group accounts, computer accounts, and OUs. Those are examples of some objects. So, all right, I've added myself to IT, but that means I can get into all the shares IT's on and everything, all the resources IT should get into by default, or that was already established, or that needs to be established. But I'm going to also add my account to the domain admins group. So going from the account, I go to member of, and notice I'm a domain user. Anybody who has an account on the domain is a domain user. And that domain users in every one group are not the same. And I promise I'll break down security groups in Windows. So Windows has security groups, and that whole idea, I'll break that down as well. Remember, we're slowly unpacking this. I'm a big fan of, starting basic and then going deeper and more detailed. Okay? So I'm going to add domain admins, right? So awesome. What that means now is I have the ultimate access across a Windows environment. So if I'm giving this away, that means I trust the person. That's me. I'm trusting myself in my own lab, right? But in a big environment, or in a formal environment, a business setting, there's a process, and there should be a change management process where IT managers keep track of this. They may not have to have it memorized who all has domain admin rights, but it couldn't hurt at least to have a list so that you keep track of it. All right, so domain admins, great. Now again, you cannot join a computer to a domain without some type of domain admin account, or some type of admin account that can do work on the domain. So here we go. I'm getting ready to show you the steps it takes to join the computer to the domain. All right, so we're done on the domain controller for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to connect to my new instance, and then I'll have this on the left corner of the screen. So that's what we'll do. Let me go ahead and get back in AWS and view instance. So it should be up by now. Enough time has passed. Here it is, no name. We're going to call it LTN client and save. Here we go. Connect. So I can either go up here, or I could right click and connect. There's always several ways to get to the same place. Downloading that file, get password, browse. This is one process. You could also save the profile, the RDP profile, meaning I could have an RDP file on my desktop with a password saved in it already, not even have to decrypt and just double click on that and it remotes me in. So here we go, decrypted. You can have that if you want it. And then connect. Here we go. Paste, whenever I get prompted with the user login, again, you know that is a form coming from the server on AWS, the Windows server, saying, hey, I don't know who you are. You're asking to connect. Who are you? Identify yourself. And then I do it. There we go. I got the certificate, which means success. Hit yes, and then it connects me. So we know it's setting up the profile, so you're going to see the black screen. In the meantime, I'm going to pop both of these open. Here we go. That way they're side by side, and this is cool, right? Because we have two remote sessions. I'm remoting in using RDP to both of these different servers that are on the same virtual private connection or virtual network in AWS. And I'm going to be referencing both because I'll need to, I don't have perfect memory, as I don't think anybody does. So on the right side here with my domain controller, I'll be pulling up command prompt. On the system behind me, which is my client, I will be joining the domain. But before you can do that, you need to change some IP address settings. Now, typically in a business or enterprise environment, you're going to have a DHCP server, which is a automatic IP address leasing server. It's a server that leases out automatic or IP addresses automatically, kind of like automating the process of IP address assignment. And it would give out everything I'm getting ready to do manually. But I'm doing it manually to show you some of the steps that need to happen before you can join a domain. So just so you know, for those of you that might be watching saying, this isn't exactly best practices, you're right. I just want to show you the proper steps here so that then when we do DHCP, it'll make a little bit more sense to you. Okay, so awesome. It's up. I'm going to go over here and this isn't properly resizing. Normally you can do this and it'll resize properly. Either way, we can use these. So I'm going to use the scroll bars. So I'm going to command prompt ipconfig, which is our command prompt command that allows us to see our IP addresses. All right, so we know that this is the IP address of my server, which is what needs to be the preferred DNS settings on my client here. So I'll show you this. Go down, and we'll go over to, let me move out of the way for you. Right down here, you see the computer icon? This computer icon is where we're going to go to set up the preferred DNS settings. So I'm doing this. I might actually just slide this over to the left, slide the server to the right. So we'll do that. That makes a little bit more sense to me. There we go. All right. So we got to change adapter settings. Go to properties of the adapter. Internet Protocol version 4. Yeah, I know we could talk about IPv6. The thing about it is NAT saved the day for IPv4 when there was the address exhaustion that they foresaw many years ahead. So they came out with IPv6 and NAT came out too. And NAT saved IPv4's butt. I'm telling you, IPv4 is still here because of NAT. And we'll talk about networking. I teach networking. It's one of my favorite things to teach. So we will cover that, and we'll cover. You may catch that in another course that I'm doing. But there are networking elements here, and you'll see within the discipline of cybersecurity, you really need a strong foundation in networking, because really cybersecurity is just an enhanced level of understanding. It's an evolved part of the industry where multiple disciplines come together. One contact I have in the industry even brilliantly puts it. He says, it's the precipice of IT, right? So I think you can get there quick, but you got to build the right foundational knowledge. So, okay, I'm going to IPv4. See, I get a little long-winded, so, rope me in sometimes. All right, so we go into use the following DNS server address. Again, this would probably be received by DHCP, because if this is a Windows 10 client plugged in, it should be getting an IP address automatically. But because of what we're doing here, I want to show you the steps that need to happen. We're doing this statically. So here, I want you to know, and I mentioned this in the last video, that when you set up a domain controller, which is where Active Directory is, it also becomes the primary DNS server, which means all the DNS lookup requests will go through the domain controller first. So the domain controller's IP address is right here. That's what needs to go in our clients field, which means if we had a DHCP server, we would have to make sure that this IP was getting leased out to all the clients on the network, right? So here we go, doing 172.31.87.191. Hit OK, OK. Another thing you want to do anytime, even if it's just joining a PC to the domain, is just try to ping between. I will let you know that in most cases, this may fail. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have failed or you set it up wrong. It just means that in Windows, over the years, because of the prominence and the rise of DDoS attacks, they've blocked ICMP in the firewall by default. So I wouldn't be surprised if this didn't go through. It may go through, but if it doesn't, that doesn't mean we've set anything up wrong. It just means that the firewall is blocking us. So how can we test this? Let me check and see my IP address over here. Just make sure we're in the same network. We are in the same subnet, which yes is right. However, ping doesn't work, which, let me make sure I've typed everything in right. Okay. So we can still try to do what's called an NS lookup. So I'm going to do NS lookup. Now that's a different protocol at play here. That's DNS, not ICMP. So we do NS lookup, see what it finds. It finds what I put in there, which is 172.31.87.191. So what I'm going to try to do now is join the client to the domain using the domain name, right? Which was, I got to double check that. I think it's ltn.internal. And anytime you want to find your domain name, you can go in here to Active Directory, ltn.internal. So I'll show you where to go. Normally, they change this because they're trying to bring in that Metro menu. They're doing away with Control Panel. Check that out. Look it up. Windows Control Panel. They're getting rid of it. No, I'm kidding. I'll miss it. But we're going to have to evolve with the touchscreen interfaces. So we'll go to this PC, right-click, go to Properties. You see the system information comes up. I'll maximize that so you can see everything. Notice work group. So you're going to go to computer name, domain, and work group settings. Go to change settings, and then change here. And we're going to join the domain. So I'll check here, domain, and then I'm going to do ltn.internal. Enter. Give it some time. We'll see if they can communicate. They should be able to. If it doesn't work, I'll get an error message. If I know it works, then it actually is going to give me a prompt. All right, so we see that ltn.internal could not be contacted. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to try to do some troubleshooting. So I'm going to go over to the server, and I am going to go to the network adapter settings, hit open network and internet settings. And I'm going to let you all say in the comments, what do you think the issue is? Because as we go through this course, we may run into issues in our setup, in our configuration processes, that are challenges that allow you to troubleshoot a little bit. Because for everything to work perfectly the first time, that's not realistic. So let's go ahead and check. I'm going to go back to the IP settings, and I want you to think about all the dynamics. Here's a hint. Think about security groups. Now, what could have happened? What could need to happen still that is blocking communication between the two devices? So I hit change adapter settings. See if it'll Give me some time here. All right. Let me close that up. Try to reopen it. It wasn't responding. So I hit open network and sharing settings. Change adapter options. And the adapter options are not there to be changed. So we could go a different route. Okay. So it's not letting me go through there. Occasionally, you do have to do things like, and this could be because I haven't run updates or anything on that image. Because remember, this server is pulling an image down, so it may not have all the Windows updates. So I'm going to go to Network and Internet from Control Panel, Network and Sharing, and watch, it'll let me in from here. Yeah. Interesting, right? So it blocked me from the Metro. You see that Metro menu that's very touch friendly, touch screen friendly. So going from here, and this is set to loopback. I'm gonna go ahead and set it to itself, which loopback is not quite itself. So I didn't mean to click that over here. Go down to CMD, and I know that my DNS address is 172.31.87.191. Hit OK. OK. Let those changes apply. And then what I'm going to do over here is try to join one more time. And you will see it either succeed or fail. So this should succeed this time since the DNS settings are right. If it doesn't, we have to look at maybe some security group settings. So what I think's happening now, if you look at this, is we're trying to communicate between instances. We've got both set up. They're on the network, but there's something blocking them. Is it the Windows firewall? Perhaps. How could we test this? Now, I'm not recommending that you leave the firewall off ever in Windows, but it's a good thing to try to test if you think you're being blocked by the firewall by bringing it down. And I'm talking bringing all firewalls down. So I'm going to go to turn Windows Defender Firewall on or off, turn them all off here, hit OK. And again, I know this is cyber defense, so we need to understand that we need firewalls. I know the software firewall, which is in Windows, is not the end-all be-all, but it is a kind of like a last line of defense. So when you're bringing it down, again, I can't stress it enough, you need to bring it back up right after. Don't leave it down. So let's say you're testing an application, you're connecting maybe to a database or connecting to Active Directory, and you're getting blocked, and you think it's the firewall, and it ends up being the firewall. Then what you need to do is you need to find out what protocol you need to allow. So if it's proprietary software, ask the vendor what firewall rule, or use Nmap to scan the server, or use Wireshark to check out what ports, and then allow that through wherever you need to connect on the firewall. And I'll show you some advanced Windows firewall stuff later. But for now, just know firewall may be the case. So what could we try to do? We could try to ping. We could try to join again, because I've dropped all the firewalls. So I'm going to hit OK. Let's see if it's the Windows firewall. And again, these steps are critical for you to follow and to know in your troubleshooting process. So let's give it some time. Still cannot connect. So I know I've got the name right. I know my IP settings are right. Let's see if a ping will get through. All right, just taking some time here. Got some little bit of performance issues here in AWS, but it's okay. I forgive them. So do CMD, and then we'll try to ping. So Again, ipconfig, and then you can pull it up over here. It's just a good practice. Ping 172.31.87.191. And that looks like a failure to me. It's going to take a little time. Request timed out, meaning it took too long to respond. The server being what I mean by it. And it's request timed out. So what I think is happening here is our security group is only allowing RDP. And this is not just from, you know how we talked about in AWS, I mentioned security groups, is a firewall from protecting your virtual private connection. Not just from the outside world coming over the internet, but also within AWS. Because, you know, that's a security issue too, is there's a lot of people that are using, in a lot of organizations that are using AWS. So your instances and them being secure from within AWS's network is important too, because you don't want people to be able to laterally move into your VPC or your instance from theirs. So let's go back into AWS. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go to my, you can get there many different ways. I'm going to go through the instance, right? I'm going here and then I'm going to go over to the security group, and notice this is the only rule. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my server. So I'm going to go into the DC and I'm going to go into the security, go to the security group, and I'm going to create a rule. Now I'm going to create a rule that only allows all traffic from the network that my client is in. So you'll watch this. Check this out. So I'm going to look back here. I'm going to have this up for reference, which is the 172 network. We could also look at, you know, the subnet, which is you can go back here and go to EC2 and it'll show you your subnets under instances. You could scroll to the right and you could see, you know, what public IP address is, but we're going to use the private since they're in the same private network. So you're going to go to networking and we can scroll down here or even make this larger and we'll see what network scheme these are in, right? Okay, so you notice here what I could essentially do is I could create some type of what's called a summary address, which is going to be like 172.31, and I could put like 80 there, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I'll go to security group, create that inbound rule. I'll edit inbound rules, and then we're going to add a rule. I'm going to say all traffic, but I'm not going to say all from anywhere. I'm going to just say all from the 172, and this is why we always need that reference, in my opinion. So that one is that address, 80. So let's just start at 80. So we'll say 172.31.80. So 172.31.80.0. Now it's going to be a bigger subnet. So you can always do subnet calculators. Like for example, I'm going to look up 255.240.0 in CIDR, which is a notation used to represent IP addresses. I can see here that that's a 19-bit, right? So CIDR chart. You can find them online. I did memorize some of these. I can't say I have them all memorized. So that's a 20-bit. Yeah, that's 20-bit. So what does that mean? You're like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I don't know what he's talking about. Well, just know that this is me putting in an address that represents all the IP addresses, all the devices within that environment. So that's what I'm allowing, right? So I'm allowing all those. So let's make sure I'm not typing in too much. There we go, just one. Save the rule. And then we're good to go on that front, right? So let's try this again. I've created the rule. Now let's see, I'm gonna do my tests. So I'll do my ping test. First, press up. Anytime you have typed something in command prompt, you haven't closed it out, it saves all that. So you can press up and it picks the last thing you typed. So look, I'm pinging it now, it's replying. Notice how before it was failing because it wasn't the Windows firewall. We tested that. And it wasn't IP address settings. We already set those up right. It was the AWS Security Group. So security groups are important. Now in a enterprise environment, on-premises environment, whatever you want to call it, this is not going to be an issue, your AWS security groups, unless you're using AWS. So I just want you to know, because we're setting up the lab environment in AWS, this is one of the considerations. All right, so ping works, right? So now I'm going to try to join my computer to the domain again. That was our old error. Now let's watch this. Watch the difference. Hit OK. And let's see what happens. You see that message? That's a good message. What does that mean? That means, and I'm so glad you asked, that means that my request to join the domain reached this server behind me over the network. So it reached there, it didn't get blocked by the security group anymore because we created a rule that allowed it through. Now what we need to do is go ahead and type in a domain admin account. Now I created my user and I gave my user domain admin rights. This is my lab, of course. Now, if you have domain admin rights or access to a domain admin account, you could do this as well. So this is where you would type in the domain admin account and then the password for it. And it's going to go ahead and join the domain now. So you'll notice here, let's go ahead and maximize that. We have a welcome. Fantastic. So we're done. That's about it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you how you can apply and change security settings on the devices on your network, so on our client, from the server, right? So you don't have to go out to all 1,000 devices. You can automate the process of configuring security settings, and that's what we're going to do. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to use group policy, not only to add firewall rules, but also how to change a few things in Windows. So thank you for watching this. I really hope that you've learned something from it. I really hope that you see that troubleshooting process work and how don't feel bad, don't panic when you run into issues. Just think through it. All right, let me know what you think about this video in the comments. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Have a good one.